"Get out! We don't serve beggars here!" The sharp, steely voice cracked like a slap across the entire room. A moment of stillness followed, as if time had frozen. The old man stood at the threshold. His white hair was drenched and clinging to his forehead. His coat was soaked through. His hand clenched tightly at his stomach, as though trying to keep the hunger from speaking out loud. No one turned to look. No one bothered to speak. Only the faint clinking of forks and knives, the scoffing chuckle of the waiter, and his cold, steel eyes, arms crossed, blocking the entrance. That man, Davis Robert, stood silently, saying nothing. No plea, no defense, only a simple gesture. He reached into his coat and pulled out a tarnished metal object, something no one cared to notice. He placed it gently on the table near the door. Quiet, precise. No one glanced at it. Give it a glance. Then he turned and walked away. The glass door clicked shut with a dry, hollow sound behind him. Outside, the rain fell harder. A damp stench seeped through the thick window panes, but inside, it was still warm enough to be indifferent. But one thing hadn't gone according to plan. The security camera was still recording, and it saw everything. He moved like a shadow. No one remembered when he began roaming the streets. Some said he used to be an engineer. Others whispered, a betrayed mercenary. A paperboy once claimed, he knows how to unlock any door, even the ones no one sees. Only one thing was certain. Davis Robert had no home, no family, no records. On paper, he didn't exist. But every day, across from Theodore's kitchen, at exactly 12:15 p.m., he appeared. He never begged. He never held out his hand. He just stood there, his eyes locked on the menu behind the thick glass. Gray eyes, fogged with time, yet sharp as razors, as if memorizing every line, every price, every item he could never afford. Some days it poured. In others, the sun blazed like fire. He was always there. The kitchen staff called him the noon ghost. Creepy as hell, muttered a dishwasher. He stands like a statue, doesn't blink, eyes like he's digging through your skull. But that day, he stepped inside. The heavy glass door creaked open. A cold gust startled the diners. He entered as if each step had been written long ago, soaked, shivering slightly, but not weak. He removed his cap, stood tall, straight. But before he could speak, a young waiter charged forward, his face flushed red. "I told you already, this isn't a charity. Get out. You're ruining everyone's appetite." Davis said nothing, just a slight bow. Not submission, but a disciplined reflex, the kind taught to men who knew arguing was wasted breath. Then he reached into his pocket. A small metal object, tightly gripped. No one saw it, just a faint click as it touched the wooden table. He turned and left. The rain was still falling. No one knew why, but the air inside the diner grew heavy, like lead. The ceiling camera caught it all. Behind him, the metal object left a faint black stain on the table, as if it had been kept in a dead man's pocket for too long. But no one noticed, except for one young customer in the corner, who pulled out a phone and pressed record, not out of kindness, but because of the look in Davis's eyes as he left. It wasn't the look of a starving man. It was the look of someone who had seen things the rest of the world couldn't begin to imagine. That evening, Wilson Theodore, the owner of the restaurant, sat alone in his second-floor office. Soft yellow light. Payroll spreadsheets are open on his laptop. Everything quiet, just the way he liked it. But as he scrolled through the security footage, Wilson suddenly stopped. It wasn't the old man's eyes that startled him. It was what he left behind. The camera had caught a clear frame. On the table, the small metal object reflected the light like scorched steel. Not brass, not silver. It looked like an alloy used in military hardware from the 1980s, something Wilson had only seen once in Military Investigation Zone 4 more than 20 years ago. Almost by instinct, he zoomed in on the frame. Etched into the object was a strange sequence of characters. D13R, Unit Chimera. Wilson didn't move. His throat tightened. That code name. No one was allowed to speak of it. It had been erased from every official record since 2002, and everyone who ever mentioned it either disappeared legally or very, very illegally. Wilson shot up from his chair. He rummaged through a drawer, the deepest one, where he kept things he'd sworn never to look at again. A plastic-wrapped envelope. No name, no postage. On the front, a handwritten note in faded black ink. When you see Mark D13, do not stay silent. It's time to pay the price. Inside was a blurry photocopy, a photograph of a classified unit. No flag, no insignia, just a scribbled name on the back, Robert Davis, Field Data Recovery, Sector CZ 400. Wilson's hands trembled. He remembered now. Back in 1999, when he was head chef at a special military training base in New Mexico, a high-ranking officer had taken him to a strange banquet. No women, no laughter, only silent men with bloodshot eyes, sun-damaged skin, and hunched backs, as if they'd lived under atmospheric pressure far too low for human life. They didn't eat. They didn't drink. They only exchanged pieces of metal, identical to the one Davis left behind. Wilson collapsed into his chair, cold sweat trickling down his spine. He whispered, "You're not a beggar. You're the living witness they didn't manage to kill." At that very moment, down the street, under a broken lamppost, a dark figure stood, holding an old flip phone. The screen lit up with a single message. 3:12 a.m. Wilson was still awake. On the table in front of him were three things: an empty glass of whiskey, the badge marked D13R, and an old hard drive, the kind used by military units in the early 2000s. He had kept it for years, because something in him always said, "This isn't over." The drive had no label. Its connector ports were rusted, but when Wilson plugged it into the old basement server system, the screen flickered and one line appeared: "Fingerprint authentication required. Unit R. Davis." Wilson didn't know if it was luck or a curse, but he still had a backup of all personnel fingerprints, something that should have been destroyed per protocol back in 2009. He searched for the entry. RD. Scanned it. The screen lit up. Dozens of files appeared, encrypted. Only one was accessible. Chimera, Recall, Mem. The first 3 minutes were blurry, glitchy footage. Drone surveillance of a tropical jungle. A squad of soldiers. A man screaming silently. No audio, but it was clear he was begging for it to stop. The camera shook violently, as if someone was trying to block the view. Then, a red caption flashed on screen. Project Chimera failed. Erase all non-listed witnesses. Special target, Unit RD. Wilson let go of the mouse. His limbs were ice. Meanwhile, 5 miles outside town, Davis Robert sat inside an abandoned train station, not sleeping, not resting, just staring at a dead digital screen, as if waiting for his name to flash back to life. In his hands, an old folded newspaper. The inside page had a square section neatly cut out. Someone appeared. No greeting. No questions. "I've just placed a brown paper bag. Inside were a neatly folded military uniform, an old photo of 13 men, and a small handwritten note. Wilson remembers. Phase 2 has begun. This time, they can't erase us." Back at the restaurant, on the security monitor, static flickered. For 0.3 seconds, a line of code appeared. "Unknown access attempt detected. Source, Gov. Node 17B. Wilson saw it, and he understood. He no longer had the luxury of silence. Theodore's kitchen. 06:04 a.m. The rolling shutter had just been lifted. The place was silent, like a funeral. Wilson stood in the kitchen, lights off. He hadn't slept. His hand trembled slightly as he held his cup of coffee, not from the cold, but because someone had just walked in. Someone hadn't locked the door fast enough to stop. Footsteps, slow, heavy, echoing across the tile floor. Davis Robert. His coat was darker than the day before. The collar was torn. The kind of tear that comes from stripping off a uniform while escaping a burning helicopter. He said nothing, just stood there, looking at Wilson. Wilson. I thought you weren't coming back. Davis, coldly. I thought you had erased me. Silence. Only the quiet hiss of the espresso machine, like the last breath of a dying beast. Wilson pulled out a chair. No invitation. Davis sat down like it was his table. They faced each other. In an empty kitchen once filled with steaming pasta plates. Now, just two old men. One erased, the other was the man who signed the order. Wilson. Project Chimera. I thought it was just a psychological warfare experiment. Davis. Soft laugh. And you thought we were the lab rats? Wilson. I was just the head chef. I cooked. I followed orders. Davis. No. You served. Wilson swallowed hard. Fragments of memory shattered like glass. He remembered 1999. The order had come from Admin Sector 3B. Meals had to be mixed with precise dosage. There was something in the meat. A behavioral suppressant. Davis had refused to eat. That day, the rest of the unit had their neural pathways realigned. Davis was the only one who resisted the system. Wilson. They told me if I didn't do it, I'd be grouped with you. Davis. And you chose to live. Wilson. I chose to survive, but I haven't truly lived since. Both men went silent. Davis opened the paper bag. I pulled out a photo. 13 men in the jungle, weathered faces, no names, no insignia. Davis had crossed out 11 heads. Only 2 remained. 11 are dead. I'm still here. You're still here. That's enough to reboot. Just then, a soft beep came from Wilson's phone. An email. No sender. No subject. Just 4 words. Stop Davis now. Wilson looked at Davis. The old man sat still. Calm. No weapon. No threat. Just his eyes. The eyes of someone who had seen his comrades explode and couldn't stop it. Davis. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back for justice. Wilson. There's no place for justice in this country anymore. Davis. Then I'll dig out a piece of land where it still lives. At that moment, across the street, 3 men in black suits stood motionless, earpieces in, eyes on the restaurant door. One nodded. Another tightened his grip on a stun weapon hidden in his sleeve. The doors to Theodore's kitchen remained shut, but the 3 figures across the street had started to move. Black suits, Bluetooth earpieces. Stun weapons are hidden neatly inside coat sleeves. They didn't show badges. They didn't ask questions. There was only one instruction repeating in their ears. Do not let the target leave the location. Priority, alive. But if not, wipe clean. Inside, Wilson glanced at his phone. The same 4 words staring back at him. Stop Davis now. No need to guess who sent it. He already knew. These people didn't have names, only codes, buried deep inside the government's internal clearance system. He looked at Davis. The man was now plugging a tiny USB into Wilson's laptop. Davis, calmly, I don't have much time left. On this drive is a 17-hour, 13-minute, 22-second recording. Every conversation the Chimera unit had before I was erased. Knock. Soft, but solid, like steel. Wilson checked the door camera. 3 men, no smiles, no second knock. Wilson, quietly. They're here. Davis, unfazed. I know. We only have one move left. He pulled the USB drive, tucked it into his coat, then reached inside and pulled out a small jamming device, the kind used in covert raids. This model hadn't been available on the black market since 2010. He pressed a button. The signal scrambled instantly. The outdoor cameras glitched, lights flickered. The Wi-Fi router let out a high-pitched squeal, then went completely dark. Outside, the lead agent nodded, ready to breach. As the sole of his boot touched the wooden door, the door swung open from the inside. Not Davis, not Wilson, but Marco, Wilson's nephew, coming up from the basement, wearing an apron, half asleep. Marco, would you gentlemen like something for breakfast? The 3 agents froze. Marco was live streaming, phone hidden in his pocket, wide-angle lens running, a caption on the screen. Live, Strangers Outside Diner at 6:18 a.m. was already spreading across social media. Wilson had triggered the live stream remotely right after reading the message, "Stop Davis now." If anything happened, this time there would be no disappearance like 20 years ago. The men in black retreated. No words spoken. One of them pulled out a phone, typed 3 words and hit send. Target engaged, activate level 2. Inside the kitchen, Davis looked at Wilson, eyes deep like ancient stone. Davis, you may have just saved my life, or pulled more people into a death spiral. Wilson, I'm just giving memory back to a town that's lived too long on lies. On the computer screen, the hard drive had finished restoring. The first line of the opened file. This is my voice, Davis Robert. If you're hearing this, either I'm dead or part of the truth has come back. 9:43 p.m., same day. In the basement of Theodore's kitchen, dim lights flickered above an old laptop. On the screen, a file titled Chimera Final Log. Davis Robert sat still, earphones buried deep. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer terror of hearing his own voice from the night no one survived. Timestamp 00:14:52. Unit 13 is no longer responding to psychological conditioning. They've started saying things that weren't part of the briefing. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Colonel L.M. Hayes, Chimera Project Supervisor. Timestamp 00:22:31. Davis is refusing orders. He's locked the relay system. Signs of active defiance. Timestamp 00:27:05. Confirmed. Initiate Echo Silence Protocol. Purge all active data. No witnesses remain. Davis pulled off the headphones. His breathing was heavy. Wilson Theodore stood beside him, holding the USB that now contained the file. Wilson, I'll send this out, not to the press, to someone who owes me a life inside the Pentagon. Davis nodded. No questions. Because in their world, blood debts are paid not with words, but with silence or survival. Meanwhile, in Chicago, inside the underground newsroom of Gray Line Files, a hidden email landed in a secure inbox. Chimera Truth, the voice of a survivor. Attached,